The white dress felt like a noose. Alara stood in the frozen courtyard, 21 years old and being sold like livestock. Her stepmother had finally found a use for her: marry the blind duke, clear the family's debts, disappear into his crumbling estate. Everyone said the duke was broken, pitiful, barely half a man. They called this marriage charity. But when Darian Blacksmore's carriage door opened and he stepped out, tall, still, his sightless eyes somehow seen straight through her, Alara felt something crack inside her chest. Not fear. Recognition. Two people the world had already discarded, standing face to face in the smoke and ash. This is their story. Stay until the end. You won't believe how it ends. Drop a comment with your city below and smash that like button. The cold bit through the thin fabric of Alara's wedding dress like teeth. She stood in the cobblestone courtyard of the Vance estate, shivering despite herself, her breath coming out in pale clouds that dissolved into the gray morning air. The city around her was always gray: smoke from the factories, fog from the river, ash that settled on every windowsill like a curse. It was the kind of place where nothing ever truly got clean. Her stepmother, Maribel, stood near the iron gates, arms crossed beneath a fur-lined cloak that cost more than Alara had eaten in the past year. Maribel's face was tight with satisfaction, her eyes gleaming the way they always did when she was about to close a deal. And that's what this was, wasn't it? A deal, a transaction, one unwanted stepdaughter, exchanged for financial salvation. "Stop fidgeting," Maribel hissed without looking at her. "You'll embarrass us." Alara's hands stilled at her sides. She didn't bother pointing out that embarrassment required witnesses who cared. There was no one here but the hired staff, a notary with ink-stained fingers, and Maribel herself. Her father hadn't even come downstairs. Of course he hadn't. Marcus Vance had stopped seeing Alara years ago, right around the time her mother died, and Maribel swept into the house with her expensive perfumes and sharp smiles. He'd loved her mother once, Alara thought. Maybe. It was hard to remember now. All she knew was that after the funeral, he'd retreated into his study, into his bottles, into silence. And when Maribel started making decisions, selling off the furniture, dismissing the old servants, rearranging Alara's life like pieces on a board, he'd said nothing. He'd let it happen, all of it. "They're late," Maribel muttered, glancing toward the street. Her fingers drummed against her arm. "Typical. Even a blind man thinks he can make us wait." Alara said nothing. She'd learned years ago that responding to Maribel only made things worse. Silence was safer. Silence meant you could stay small, stay out of the way, stay alive. But silence also meant swallowing everything, every insult, every dismissal, every moment of being treated like furniture in your own home. She was so damn tired of swallowing. The sound of carriage wheels on stone cut through the quiet. Maribel straightened immediately, smoothing her skirts, arranging her face into something that almost resembled warmth. "Finally," she murmured. "Remember, smile, be gracious, and for heaven's sake, don't speak unless he asks you something directly. Men like him don't want opinions, they want obedience." Alara's jaw tightened. The carriage came into view, black lacquered wood, no family crest, pulled by two gray horses that looked as cold and miserable as she felt. It stopped just inside the gates, and for a moment no one moved. Then the door opened. A man stepped out. Alara had expected something else. The rumors had painted Darian Blackmore as fragile, weak, a tragic figure locked away in his ancestral estate like a ghost. She'd imagined someone hunched, uncertain, maybe even pitiful. The man standing before her was none of those things. He was tall, taller than her father, broader in the shoulders than any man she'd seen up close. His coat was dark, tailored perfectly, and he moved with a kind of deliberate precision that made the air around him feel heavier. His face was sharp, handsome in a way that made you forget to breathe. And his eyes were pale, almost silver, and they didn't focus on anything. Blind. But gods, he didn't look blind. He looked like he could see straight through her skin and into the ugly, desperate truth underneath. Maribel stepped forward, all charm and grace. "Your Grace," she said, her voice dripping honey. "What an honor. We are so grateful. Where is she?" His voice cut through Maribel's performance like a blade. Low, steady, and completely uninterested in pleasantries. Maribel faltered for half a second, then gestured toward Alara. "Of course, this is Alara, my stepdaughter. As we discussed, I wasn't asking you." Silence. Maribel's smile froze on her face. The notary shifted uncomfortably. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Darian Blackmore tilted his head slightly, and though his eyes didn't move, Alara had the strangest sensation that he was looking directly at her, through her, into her. "Step forward," he said. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It was just a statement, as if he already knew she would. And she did. Alara's feet moved before she could think about it, carrying her across the courtyard until she stood a few paces in front of him, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, close enough to smell leather and smoke and something else, something darker. Closer. Her heart kicked in her chest, but she obeyed. One more step, then another, until she was near enough to touch him if she wanted. She didn't want to, did she? "What's your name?" he asked. "Alara Vance." "Do you want to be here, Alara Vance?" The question hit her like a slap. No one had ever asked her that, not once, not about anything. Behind her, Maribel made a soft, horrified sound. "Your Grace, I assure you she is perfectly willing." "I didn't ask you," Darian said again, his tone colder this time. "I asked her." Alara's throat felt tight. She could feel Maribel's eyes burning into her back, could feel the weight of every unspoken threat, every consequence waiting if she said the wrong thing. But something in her, something small and stubborn and furious, refused to lie. "No," she said quietly. "I don't." Maribel gasped. The notary's pen froze mid-stroke. Darian Blackmore smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't warm or comforting or reassuring. It was sharp and knowing and just a little bit dangerous. "Good," he said. "Honesty is rare." He turned slightly, addressing the notary without looking at him. "Bring the papers. We'll sign now." "But," Maribel sputtered, "Your Grace, surely you don't mean to proceed after she told the truth?" Darian's head tilted again, and this time there was something almost mocking in his expression. "Why would that stop me, Mrs. Vance? Isn't honesty what you wanted in a bride for me? Or did you just want someone who'd lie prettily and do as she's told?" Maribel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Alara felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope? No. Too dangerous. But maybe possibility. The notary shuffled forward, laying the marriage contract on a small table someone had dragged into the courtyard. Darian signed without hesitation, his hand steady despite his blindness, the signature clean and practiced. Then he held the pen out toward Alara. "Your turn." She stared at it, at the contract, at the life she was about to sign herself into. "Once you sign," Darian said quietly, "you belong to no one but yourself. Not her, not him, not me. You'll be a duchess, and that comes with power. What you do with it is your choice." Alara's fingers closed around the pen. She didn't look at Maribel. Didn't look at the notary or the servants or the cold gray sky. She looked at Darian Blackmore. This blind duke everyone pitied, this man who somehow saw more than anyone else in this godforsaken city. And she signed her name. The ink was still wet when Maribel tried one last time. "Your Grace, about the dowry terms, you'll get nothing." Maribel went pale. "But we agreed I would marry your stepdaughter," Darian said. "And I have. The debts you expected me to clear? Your problem. The social standing you thought you'd gain? Gone. You sold her for nothing, Mrs. Vance. Congratulations." He turned, offering his arm to Alara. "Shall we?" She hesitated for only a heartbeat before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. His arm was solid, warm through the fabric of his coat. He guided her toward the carriage with perfect confidence, as if he could see every stone, every step, every shadow. Behind them, Maribel was shouting something, her voice shrill and desperate, but Alara didn't listen. She climbed into the carriage and Darian followed, settling across from her with that same unsettling grace. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward, and just like that, Alara Vance left behind the only home she'd ever known. The ride was silent for the first 10 minutes. Alara sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap, trying not to stare at the man across from her. Darian hadn't spoken since they'd left the courtyard. He sat perfectly still, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you do that?" He didn't move. "Do what?" "Refused to pay her. You agreed to the terms." "I agreed to marry you," Darian corrected. "I never agreed to reward her for selling you." Alara frowned. "You'll make an enemy of her." "She was already my enemy," Now she just knows it. That's not... Alara stopped, shaking her head. You don't understand. She'll find a way to make this worse. She always does. For you or for me? Both. Darian leaned back, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. Let her try. Alara stared at him. There was something deeply unsettling about his confidence. Not arrogance exactly, but certainty. Like he knew something she didn't. You're not afraid of her, she said slowly. No. Why not? Because I know what she is. His pale eyes shifted slightly, almost as if he were looking at her. And I know what you are. Alara's breath caught. What am I? Stronger than you think. The words settled over her like a weight. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't strong, she was just good at surviving. But something in his tone made her pause. How long have you been blind? She asked instead. Since I was 12. An accident? An assassination attempt. Alara's eyes widened. Someone tried to kill you? Someone tried to kill my father. I got in the way. He said it so casually, like he was describing the weather. Poison. It didn't kill me, but it took my sight. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me to see better than most people ever do. Alara didn't know what to say to that. The carriage rattled on through the city streets, past crumbling tenements and smoke-stained factories. Eventually, the buildings thinned out, replaced by empty fields and skeletal trees. Where are we going? Alara asked. Home. Your estate. Our estate now. The correction sent a strange shiver through her. What's it like? She asked. Old cold. Mostly empty. He paused. You'll hate it at first. And later? You'll hate it less. Despite herself, Alara almost smiled. The estate appeared on the horizon like a wound in the landscape, a massive stone structure perched on a hill, surrounded by dead gardens and iron gates. It looked like something out of a nightmare, all sharp angles and broken windows. It's impressive, Alara lied. It's a tomb, Darian said, but it's our tomb. No one bothers us here. The carriage stopped in front of the main entrance. Darian stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her down. His grip was firm, steady. The doors opened before they reached them, revealing an older woman with gray hair and a severe expression. Mrs. Brennan, Darian said. This is Alara. She'll be staying. Mrs. Brennan's eyes swept over Alara with the kind of assessment that left bruises. I see. Prepare the Duchess's chambers, Darian continued, and make sure she has everything she needs. Of course, Your Grace. Alara followed them inside, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty hall. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and the air smelled like dust and old wood. It was freezing. Your rooms are upstairs, Darian said. Mrs. Brennan will show you. I have work to attend to. He turned and walked away, navigating the dark hallways with perfect confidence, leaving Alara standing alone with the housekeeper. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened slightly. Come along, then. Let's get you settled. Alara followed her up a winding staircase, through corridors that seemed to go on forever, until they reached a set of double doors. These will be yours, Mrs. Brennan said, pushing them open. The room was enormous, far larger than anything Alara had ever had. A canopy bed dominated one wall, and tall windows looked out over the dead gardens. It's beautiful, Alara said quietly. It's been empty for years, Mrs. Brennan replied. The last Duchess died before I came to work here. His Grace has been alone ever since. How long has that been? 9 years. 9 years, alone in this vast, cold house. Alara walked to the window, staring out at the skeletal trees and the gray sky beyond. What's he like? She asked. Really? Mrs. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. He's not what people think, she said finally. People see the blindness and assume he's weak. They're wrong. I noticed. Good. Then you're smarter than most. Mrs. Brennan moved toward the door. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. She left Alara alone in the enormous room, surrounded by silence and shadows. Alara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking slightly. She'd done it. She'd signed the papers, left her old life behind, stepped into something completely unknown. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was holding her breath, waiting to see if she'd finally learned to swim. Dinner was a strange, tense affair. The dining room was as vast and cold as the rest of the house. lit by candles that threw long shadows across the table. Darian sat at one end, Elara at the other, with enough space between them to fit a small army. She picked at her food, hyper-aware of every sound, the scrape of her fork, the clink of her glass, the steady rhythm of Darian's breathing. He ate with perfect precision, his movements economical and exact. No fumbling, no hesitation. "You're staring," he said without looking up. Elara flushed. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize, just tell me why." She set down her fork. "You move like you can see." "I can, just not the way you do." "How then?" He leaned back in his chair, considering. Sound, air pressure, memory. The world leaves patterns if you know how to read them. That sounds exhausting. So does living with sight and still refusing to see what's in front of you. Elara blinked. "Is that aimed at me?" "It's aimed at everyone." He tilted his head. "But yes, also you. I see perfectly fine." "Do you?" Darian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then tell me, what did your stepmother see when she looked at you?" Elara's throat tightened. "A burden." "And your father?" "Nothing. And you believed them." It wasn't a question. Elara's hands clenched in her lap. What was I supposed to believe? That they were wrong? That I mattered? Yes. The single word hung in the air like a challenge. "You don't know anything about me," Elara said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I know you told the truth when lying would have been easier," Darian replied. "I know you're still here when you could have run, and I know you're angry." "I'm not." "You're furious. You've been swallowing it for years, and it's eating you alive." Elara stared at him, her heart pounding. He was right. She was angry. She'd been angry for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like not to be. "What am I supposed to do with it?" she asked quietly. "Use it." "For what?" "Whatever you want." Darian stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're a duchess now, Elara. That means power, money, influence. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" He left the room before she could answer, his footsteps fading into the dark hallways. Elara sat alone at the long table, surrounded by shadows and silence. And for the first time in her life, she let herself imagine what it might feel like to stop being small, to stop being quiet, to stop swallowing everything, and finally let herself take up space. She didn't have an answer yet, but she was starting to think she might find one. The first week passed like walking through fog. Elara learned the rhythms of the house quickly because there weren't many. Darian disappeared into his study most mornings and didn't emerge until dinner. Mrs. Brennan moved through the halls like a ghost, appearing only when needed. The handful of other servants, a cook, 2 maids, a groundskeeper who never came inside, kept to themselves. It was the loneliest place Elara had ever lived, and she'd grown up in a house where her own father pretended she didn't exist. She spent her days exploring the estate, mapping out rooms that hadn't been opened in years, finding libraries with books no one had touched, portraits of Blackmore's long dead staring down at her with the same pale eyes their descendant had inherited. The gardens were worse than dead. They were angry. Thorns everywhere, dead roses clinging to trellises like claws, stone paths cracked and swallowed by weeds. It looked like someone had tried to kill the beauty here and almost succeeded. On the 8th day, Elara made a decision. She found Mrs. Brennan in the kitchen, kneading dough with the kind of violence that suggested she was imagining someone's face. "I want to fix the gardens," Elara said. Mrs. Brennan didn't look up. "Why?" "Because they're horrible." "They've been horrible for 9 years. Why fix them now?" "Because I live here now." That got the housekeeper's attention. She stopped kneading, wiped her hands on her apron, and studied Elara with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "The Duke won't care," Mrs. Brennan said finally. "I'm not asking him. I'm telling you." Something shifted in Mrs. Brennan's expression, not quite approval, but close. "You'll need tools, money for supplies. The groundskeeper's half-blind himself and useless with plants." "Then I'll do it myself." "You don't know the first thing about gardening." "I'll learn." Mrs. Brennan stared at her for a long moment, then turned back to her dough. "There's an old greenhouse past the east wing. Keys are in the study, second drawer on the left. Don't tell His Grace I told you." Elara found the study door unlocked. The room was exactly what she'd expected. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk covered in papers written in Braille. It smelled like leather and ink and something else. Something distinctly Darian. She found the keys where Mrs. Brennan said they'd be, but as she turned to leave, her eyes caught on something else. A map. It was spread across a side table, marked with pins and notes in that same raised braille script. But there were other markings too, drawn in ink, visible, deliberate. Alara stepped closer. The map showed the city and the surrounding territories. Red pins clustered around certain locations. Warehouses, estates, what looked like government buildings. Black lines connected them like a web. What the hell was this? Looking for something? Alara spun around so fast she nearly knocked over a lamp. Darian stood in the doorway, perfectly still, his head tilted in that way that made her feel like he could see straight through her. Mrs. Brennan said the greenhouse keys were in here, Alara stammered. I wasn't snooping. You were absolutely snooping. He walked into the room with that unsettling confidence, navigating around furniture without hesitation. But that's fine. I would have done the same. I didn't look at your papers. You looked at the map. It wasn't a question. Alara's throat went dry. I don't understand it. Good. You're not supposed to. He moved past her, his fingers trailing along the desk's edge until he found what he was looking for. A folder, which he picked up and tucked under his arm. The greenhouse? I want to fix the gardens. Why? Because they're dead. So are a lot of things. Darian turned toward her, and even though his eyes couldn't focus, Alara felt pinned in place. Why does it matter? Because I'm tired of living in a graveyard. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. Darian was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Fair enough. Take whatever you need from the greenhouse. If you want a budget for new plants, tell Mrs. Brennan. You don't care what I do. I care that you're doing something. He moved toward the door, then paused. Most people who come here just wait to leave. You're the first person in 9 years who's tried to stay. He left before she could respond. Alara stood alone in the study, keys clutched in her hand, her heart beating faster than it should. The greenhouse was a revelation. It was massive, glass walls streaked with grime but still intact, and inside chaos. Beautiful, overgrown chaos. Vines had taken over everything, climbing up support beams and wrapping around long-dead plants. But underneath, Alara could see the bones of something incredible. Workbenches lined one wall, clay pots stacked in precarious towers. Seed packets, most of them too old to be useful, scattered across shelves. And in the back corner, a small writing desk with a journal. Alara opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. The entries dated back 12 years. Darian helped me plant the climbing roses today. He insisted on doing it himself, even though he kept putting the seeds in upside down. I didn't have the heart to tell him. His mother. This had been his mother's greenhouse. Alara closed the journal gently, something twisting in her chest. She spent the rest of the day clearing debris, scrubbing glass, organizing tools. Her hands got dirty, her dress got ruined. She didn't care. For the first time since arriving, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. When she returned to the house at dusk, filthy and exhausted, Mrs. Brennan took one look at her and actually smiled. You'll need different clothes, the housekeeper said. Those are useless for real work. I don't have anything else. Then we'll get you something. Mrs. Brennan gestured toward the stairs. Clean up. Dinner's in an hour. Alara made it to her room, washed the dirt from her hands and face, and changed into the only other dress she owned, a simple gray thing Maribel had deemed acceptable for a servant's daughter. When she came down to dinner, Darian was already seated. You've been busy, he said as she sat down. How did you know? You smell like dirt and old glass. He picked up his wine glass with perfect precision. The greenhouse? Yes. Find anything interesting? Alara hesitated. Your mother's journal. Darian went very still. I'm sorry, Alara said quickly. I didn't mean to intrude. Did you read it? Only one entry. I closed it when I realized what it was. Why? Because it wasn't mine to read. Darian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around the stem of his wine glass. She loved that greenhouse, spent more time there than anywhere else in the house. It's beautiful. Or it was. She died in the spring, Darian said softly. The roses were just starting to bloom. After the funeral, I had everything shut down. Couldn't stand the thought of them blooming without her there to see it. Alara's throat felt tight. I can stop. If you want. No. Darian set down his glass. She would have hated seeing it like this. Dead. Forgotten. He turned his head slightly toward her. Bring it back to life if you can. She'd like that. They ate in silence after that, but it felt different than before, less empty, more like two people learning how to exist in the same space without destroying each other. The next morning, Alara woke to shouting. She threw on a robe and ran downstairs to find Mrs. Brennan blocking the front door, her face rigid with fury, while a familiar voice screeched from the other side. I demand to see my stepdaughter. I have every right. Maribel. Alara's stomach dropped. You have no rights here, Mrs. Brennan said coldly. Leave before I have you removed. I'll do no such thing. Alara, I know you can hear me. Alara started to move forward, but a hand caught her arm. Darian. He was already dressed, his expression unreadable. Stay here, he said quietly. She'll make a scene. Let her. He walked to the door and pulled it open himself. Maribel stood on the steps, dressed in expensive furs, her face twisted with righteous anger. Behind her stood two men Alara didn't recognize, hired muscle, probably. Your Grace, Maribel said, her voice dripping false sweetness. Thank heavens. I've been so worried about poor Alara. I simply had to see for myself that she's being treated well. She's fine, Darian said flatly. Leave. But I haven't even seen her because she doesn't want to see you. How would you know? Maribel's voice sharpened. You can't even see her yourself. The words hung in the air like poison. Darian smiled. It was the coldest thing Alara had ever seen. You're right, he said softly. I can't see her, but I can hear her breathing change when you speak. I can smell the fear you cause, and I can feel the way she tenses every time your voice gets louder. He took a step forward. So yes, Mrs. Vance, I know exactly what you are, even if I can't see you. Maribel's face went white. Now get off my property, Darian continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing. You wouldn't dare! Try me. The two men behind Maribel shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered something about not being paid enough for this. Maribel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then she turned on her heel and stalked toward her carriage, the hired men scrambling after her. This isn't over, she shouted back. I'll ruin you, both of you. Darian closed the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Alara stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Yes, I did. Darian turned toward her, his expression softer now. She'll be back. People like her always come back. I know. Are you afraid of her? Alara thought about it, really thought about it. Not anymore, she said slowly. I think I'm more afraid of becoming her. You won't. How do you know? Because you're already choosing differently. Darian walked past her, heading toward the study. Keep working on the greenhouse. Let her scream all she wants. She can't touch you here. Alara watched him disappear down the hallway, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. Safety. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like. The weeks that followed fell into a strange new rhythm. Alara worked in the greenhouse every day, clearing out the dead plants, repairing broken glass, coaxing life back into soil that had been abandoned for nearly a decade. She ordered new seeds, new soil, new tools. Mrs. Brennan helped her catalog everything, and even the cook started bringing her cuttings from the kitchen herbs. Darian continued his mysterious work in the study, emerging only for meals and the occasional walk through the estate grounds. But he started asking questions about the greenhouse, about what she was planting, about her plans. He listened when she talked. No one had ever done that before. One evening, as they sat in the library after dinner, Alara finally asked the question that had been eating at her. What do you do all day? Darian looked up from the book he'd been reading, his fingers moving across the braille with practiced ease. Work. What kind of work? The kind that keeps this estate running. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. Alara set down her own book. The map in your study, the one with all the pins. What is it? You're very curious. You're very evasive. Darian's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Fair point. He closed his book. I'm tracking smuggling routes. Alara blinked. Smuggling? The city is rotting from the inside out. Corrupt officials, black market trade, people disappearing in the night. Someone has to pay attention. And that someone is you? I have resources, connections. And no one takes a blind man seriously, which makes gathering information remarkably easy. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing. Alara stared at him. Does anyone else know? A few trusted people, but most of the nobility thinks I'm a recluse who can barely dress himself. His smile turned sharp. Let them think that. It's useful. You let people underestimate you on purpose. Don't you? The question hit her like a slap, because he was right. She'd spent years making herself small, invisible, unthreatening. She'd let Maribel dismiss her, let her father ignore her, let everyone assume she was nothing. And maybe, just maybe, that had kept her alive when being noticed would have destroyed her. I never thought of it that way, Alara said quietly. Most people don't. Darian stood, moving toward the window with that eerie precision. They see weakness and assume helplessness. But sometimes the smartest thing you can do is let them believe their own lies while you work in the shadows. Is that what you want me to do? Work in the shadows? I want you to decide what you want to be. He turned back toward her. You're not a victim anymore, Alara. You're a duchess. That comes with power. The question is whether you're brave enough to use it. The words settled over her like a challenge. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Darian had said, about power, about choice, about becoming something more than the discarded daughter everyone had written off. She got out of bed and walked to the window, staring out at the dark gardens below. The greenhouse glowed faintly in the moonlight, its glass panels catching the silver light. She'd brought life back to that place. Real, growing, breathing life. Maybe she could do the same for herself. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 3 days later, the first letter arrived. Mrs. Brennan brought it to Alara in the greenhouse, her expression troubled. This came for you, she said, by private courier. Alara wiped the dirt from her hands and took the envelope. It was expensive paper, sealed with red wax. She broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Dearest Alara, I hope this letter finds you well. Your father and I have been so worried about you, alone in that dreadful estate with that poor, unfortunate man. We've heard such troubling rumors, that he keeps you locked away, that you're not allowed visitors, that you're being mistreated. As your family, we have a responsibility to ensure your welfare. I'm writing to invite you to tea next week at the Ashford Club. It's a public place, perfectly respectable. Surely your husband would have no objection to you maintaining connections with your family. Please come. We miss you terribly. With love, Maribel. Alara read it twice, her hands shaking with anger. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. The false concern, the public venue chosen specifically to force Darian's hand, the implied threat of scandal if he refused. She crumpled the letter and threw it in the compost bin. What will you tell her? Mrs. Brennan asked. Nothing. Alara turned back to her planting. She can wait. But Maribel, as it turned out, was done waiting. 2 days later, a notice appeared in the city's main newspaper. Alara found out when Darian came into the greenhouse, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. We have a problem, he said. He handed her a printed page. Alara read it, her blood turning to ice. Concerns raised over Duchess's welfare. Questions have been raised regarding the well-being of the new Duchess of Blackmore, formerly Miss Alara Vance. Sources close to the family report that the young Duchess has not been seen in public since her marriage to the reclusive Duke Darian Blackmore 3 weeks ago. Mrs. Maribel Vance, stepmother to the Duchess, expressed concern that her stepdaughter may be isolated and unable to seek help should she require it. I only want to know she's safe, Mrs. Vance stated. Given the Duke's condition, I worry that Alara may not be receiving proper care. The Duke of Blackmore has not responded to requests for comment. Alara's hands clenched around the paper. She's using the newspapers now. She's forcing our hand, Darian corrected. If we don't respond, the rumors will spread. If we do respond, we're playing her game. So what do? Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then his expression shifted into something calculating. We changed the game, he said. There's a charity ball next week. The Ashford Foundation. Every important family in the city will be there. You want us to go? I want us to make an entrance. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Let them see you. Let them see us together. And let Maribel watch while her little scheme falls apart in front of everyone who matters. Alara's heart kicked in her chest. I've never been to anything like that. Good. They won't expect you to know the rules. Darian stepped closer. But here's the truth, Alara. You're a duchess now. That means you outrank almost everyone in that room, including your stepmother. The question is whether you're ready to act like it. Alara thought about the greenhouse, about bringing dead things back to life, about refusing to stay small just because it was easier. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." "Then we'll need to get you a dress." The dressmaker arrived the next day, a sharp-eyed woman named Claudette, who took one look at Alara and said, "Finally, someone with actual bone structure to work with." She spent 3 hours pinning and measuring while Alara stood on a platform in her room, feeling like a doll being prepared for display. "What kind of dress do you want?" Claudette asked. Alara thought about it, about Maribel's expensive furs and false smiles, about every time she'd been told to be quiet, be small, be invisible. "Something they can't ignore," she said. Claudette grinned. "I can work with that." The week passed in a blur of preparations. Alara practiced walking in heeled shoes, learned how to hold a wine glass properly, memorized the names and titles of everyone who would be at the ball. Darian drilled her mercilessly. "Who is Lord Ashford? Head of the Merchants Guild, controls most of the city's trade routes." "Lady Pemberton? Chair of the Charitable Foundation, throws the ball every year, hates anyone under 40. "And if someone asks about our marriage?" "I smile and tell them I'm very happy." "Are you?" The question caught her off guard. Darian stood across from her in the library, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," Alara said honestly, "but I'm not miserable. That's more than I expected." "Low bar." "It's my bar." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "You'll do fine," he said quietly. The night of the ball arrived faster than Alara was ready for. She stood in front of the mirror in her room, staring at a stranger. The dress was deep emerald green, cut to fit her perfectly, with a neckline that was just daring enough to make a statement. Her hair was swept up, exposing her neck and shoulders. Claudette had even arranged for jewelry, simple but elegant. She looked like a duchess. She looked like someone who mattered. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway. "The carriage is ready. His Grace is waiting." Alara took a deep breath and followed her downstairs. Darian stood at the bottom of the steps, dressed in formal evening wear that made him look even more imposing than usual. He turned as she approached, his head tilting slightly. "You look nervous," he said. "I am nervous." "Good. So is everyone else." He offered his arm. "Ready?" Alara slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. "No." "Liar." Despite herself, she smiled. The carriage ride to the Ashford estate was silent. Alara watched the city pass by outside the window, the smoke, the factories, the crumbling buildings giving way to manicured gardens and grand houses. "What if I mess this up?" she asked quietly. "Then we'll deal with it." Darian's voice was steady. "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're already stronger than everyone in that room. You just haven't realized it yet." The carriage stopped. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. The door opened. Darian stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her down. The Ashford estate blazed with light, music spilling from the open doors. Carriages lined the drive, and elegantly dressed people moved in clusters across the grounds. Alara took Darian's arm, and together they walked toward the entrance. Every eye turned toward them. She felt the weight of their stares, curious, judgmental, hungry for scandal. And then she saw Maribel. Her stepmother stood near the entrance with a group of well-dressed women, her face frozen in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Maribel's smile faltered. Alara lifted her chin and walked forward, her hand steady on Darian's arm. Let them look. Let them whisper. She wasn't the unwanted stepdaughter anymore. She was the Duchess of Blackmore, and she was done being afraid. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and cruelty dressed up as elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting fractured light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Women in silk and diamonds moved like predatory birds, their laughter sharp and calculated. Men clustered in corners, cigars and brandy in hand, conducting business disguised as conversation. Alara had never seen so much money in one place trying so hard to look effortless. "Breathe," Darian murmured beside her. She realized she'd been holding her breath. They moved through the entrance together, and the effect was immediate. Conversations stuttered and died. Heads turned. The orchestra continued playing, but the music seemed to fade beneath the weight of 100 stares. Alara kept her chin up, her hand steady on Darian's arm. She could feel the muscles in his forearm, tense but controlled. He navigated the room with absolute confidence, his steps precise, his head held high. No one would ever guess he couldn't see them. "The Duke and Duchess of Blackmore," the announcer's voice rang out. The whispers started immediately. I heard he hasn't left his estate in years. Poor girl, married to a blind man. Charity case, obviously. Look at her dress, trying so hard. Alara's fingers tightened on Darian's arm. Ignore them, he said quietly. They're testing you. Don't give them the satisfaction. A woman materialized in front of them, all white hair and cold eyes. Lady Pemberton, Alara remembered, chair of the foundation, hated everyone under 40. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton said, her voice dripping false warmth. What a surprise. We'd heard you were indisposed. I'm here, Darian replied smoothly, as is my wife. Lady Pemberton's eyes raked over Alara like she was inspecting livestock. Charming, though I must say we were all quite concerned when we read about your situation in the papers. My situation is perfectly satisfactory, Alara said before she could stop herself. Lady Pemberton's eyebrows rose. How bold, though I suppose one must be given the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? Darian's voice had gone cold. Why, your condition, of course. Lady Pemberton smiled sweetly. It must be so difficult managing a household when you can't see what's happening under your own roof. The insult was so casual, so practiced, that it took Alara a moment to fully register it. Darian's expression didn't change. I see more than most people, Lady Pemberton. For instance, I can see that your late husband's gambling debts are still being quietly paid off by your daughter's husband. I can see that your charitable foundation launders money through shell companies in the warehouse district. And I can see that you're wearing last season's necklace despite claiming your investments have been lucrative. Lady Pemberton's face went white, then red. How dare you? Facts aren't daring, Darian said mildly. They just are. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe my wife would like some champagne. He guided Alara away, leaving Lady Pemberton sputtering in their wake. Did you just, Alara started, destroy her credibility in 30 seconds? Yes. How did you know all that? I told you, people underestimate me. It makes them careless. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. And now everyone in this room knows that coming after us is dangerous. Watch. They'll give us space now. He was right. As they moved through the ballroom, people stepped back, their conversations hushed. No one approached directly, but the stares continued, hungry and vicious. Alara spotted Maribel across the room, surrounded by her usual circle of social climbers. Her stepmother was watching them with an expression that made Alara's skin crawl. Not anger, not embarrassment, calculation. She's planning something, Alara murmured. I know. Darian's hand covered hers briefly. Stay close to me. They made their way to the refreshment table, where a servant handed Alara a glass of champagne. She took it gratefully, needing something to do with her hands. Duchess Blackmore. The voice was smooth, cultured, and entirely unfamiliar. Alara turned to find a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He bowed slightly. Lord Ashford, he said, I'm delighted you could attend. Lord Ashford. Darian's tone was carefully neutral. Thank you for the invitation. I must confess, I was surprised when you accepted. You've declined every invitation for the past 9 years. Ashford's eyes flicked to Alara. Marriage must agree with you. It does. How fortunate. Ashford took a sip of his drink. Though I hope you won't take offense if I say we were all quite concerned about the circumstances. The newspaper article raised some troubling questions. Questions planted by my stepmother, Alara said flatly, who is attempting to manipulate public opinion for her own gain. Ashford's smile widened. Direct. I like that. But you must understand, when allegations are made publicly, they must be addressed publicly. The concern, of course, is whether you're truly here of your own free will. I'm here because I chose to be, Alara said. Under some pressure, perhaps? Given your family's financial difficulties. My stepmother's financial difficulties, Alara corrected, which she created through her own poor decisions and attempted to solve by selling me to the highest bidder. The fact that His Grace refused to reward her for it seems to have upset her sense of entitlement. Ashford's eyebrows rose. That's quite an accusation. It's quite a truth. Still, Ashford set down his glass. Perception matters in our circles. Perhaps it would ease concerns if you were to demonstrate your autonomy, speak publicly, reassure people that you're not being controlled. Darian's hand found Alara's elbow, a subtle warning, but something in Alara snapped. She was so tired of men telling her what to do, what to say, how to prove she was real, she was whole, she mattered. You want a demonstration? Alara asked, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. Fine, I'll give you one. She stepped away from Darian, moved to the center of the ballroom, and raised her voice. Excuse me, may I have everyone's attention? The orchestra stumbled to a halt. Conversations died. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Alara's heart hammered, but she kept her chin up. I know there have been questions about my marriage, she said clearly. About whether I chose it, whether I'm being mistreated, whether I'm some victim who needs saving. She paused. So let me be very clear. I married the Duke of Blackmore of my own free will. I remain with him of my own free will. And anyone who suggests otherwise is either misinformed or deliberately lying. Whispers rippled through the crowd. My stepmother, Maribel Vance, arranged this marriage to clear her own debts. When His Grace refused to pay them, she decided to weaponize public concern to force his hand. That's not charity. That's extortion. Alara's eyes found Maribel in the crowd. And I won't be used as a tool in her schemes anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Maribel pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of wounded dignity. Alara, darling, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. I understand you're upset, but these accusations, I only ever wanted what was best for you. You wanted what was best for yourself, Alara cut her off. You always have. And now that you can't control me anymore, you're trying to destroy me instead. That's not true. Maribel pressed a hand to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. I raised you like my own daughter. You tolerated me because you had to. You dismissed me, belittled me, made me feel small and worthless every single day. Alara's voice was shaking now, but she didn't stop. And the second you found a way to profit from getting rid of me, you took it. Don't you dare stand here and pretend you ever cared. Maribel's tears dried up instantly, her expression hardening. You ungrateful little... Careful! Darian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He'd moved to stand beside Alara without her noticing, his presence solid and unshakable. You're in a room full of witnesses, he continued, and my wife has just publicly accused you of extortion and manipulation. If you were smart, you'd leave quietly. This is ridiculous, Maribel spat. You can't possibly believe her over me. I believe the bank records, Darian said calmly, which show your debts total nearly £50,000. I believe the legal documents outlining the marriage terms you proposed, which included full debt forgiveness in exchange for Alara's hand, and I believe the letters you sent to various newspapers, providing anonymous tips about my wife's supposed captivity. The color drained from Maribel's face. You have no proof. I have all the proof. Darian's smile was cold. I've had investigators watching you since the day Alara signed the marriage contract. Every conversation, every transaction, every lie you've told. He turned his head slightly, addressing the room. Would anyone like to see the documentation? It's quite detailed. No one spoke. Maribel looked around wildly, searching for support, but found only averted eyes and uncomfortable silence. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, Darian said quietly. It is. You're done using Alara. You're done spreading lies. And if you come near my wife again, I'll ensure every person in this city knows exactly what kind of woman you are. Maribel's mouth opened and closed. Then she turned and fled, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. The silence stretched for another heartbeat. Then Lord Ashford began to clap. It was slow at first, almost mocking, but others joined in. The applause spread through the ballroom like wildfire, though Alara couldn't tell if it was genuine or just relief that the drama was over. She didn't care. She felt like she might throw up. Darian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Well done, he murmured. I think I need air, she whispered back. Then let's get you some. He guided her through the crowd and out onto a balcony that overlooked the estate's gardens. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but it helped clear her head. I can't believe I just did that, Alara said, her hands shaking as she gripped the balcony railing. I can. Darian stood beside her, his expression unreadable. You were magnificent. I was terrified. So was everyone else in that room. Alara laughed, but it came out shaky. Did you really have investigators watching her? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to decide how to handle her yourself. Darian turned toward her. I could have destroyed her reputation months ago, but that would have been me solving your problem. You needed to face her yourself. That's manipulative. It's strategic. There's a difference. Alara studied him in the moonlight. You really can't see me right now, can you? No. Then how did you know exactly where I was when you walked out here? I heard your breathing change, felt the shift in air when you moved. He smiled slightly. I told you, I see better than most people. That's terrifying. Is it? A little. Alara hesitated. Darian, why did you really marry me? The question hung between them. The truth? Darian asked. Please. Because you were honest when everyone else lies, because you didn't pity me or try to manipulate me, and because I recognize something in you that I see in myself. What? Someone who refuses to break. Alara's throat felt tight. I break all the time. No, you bend, you survive, but you don't break. He reached out, his hand finding her shoulder with surprising accuracy. You're stronger than you know, Alara, and I think you're finally starting to realize it. Before Alara could respond, the balcony door burst open. A young man stumbled out, his face pale, his clothes disheveled. Your Grace, he gasped. There's been an... You need to come inside. Darian's expression went cold. What happened? Lord Pemberton, he's collapsed. Someone said... The man swallowed hard. They think he's been poisoned. The ballroom had erupted into chaos. Servants rushed back and forth with water and towels. Women clustered in corners, their voices shrill with panic. Men argued loudly about whether to call a physician or the police. In the center of it all, Lord Pemberton lay on the floor, convulsing, foam at his mouth. Lady Pemberton knelt beside him, screaming for help. Darian pushed through the crowd with Alara close behind. Everyone move back, he commanded. Give him air. What's happening? Alara whispered. Poison, probably in his drink. Darian knelt beside Lord Pemberton, his hands moving carefully over the man's chest and throat. Rapid onset. Neurotoxin, maybe. How do you... I've seen it before. His jaw tightened. Someone call a physician. Now. Lord Ashford appeared at Darian's shoulder. The servants are already running for one. But, Your Grace, who would do this? That's an excellent question. Darian stood slowly. This was deliberate, targeted. But Lord Pemberton has no enemies. Everyone here has enemies, Darian cut him off. The question is who benefits from his death? A voice rang out from the crowd. It was the wine! Heads turned. A servant stood near the refreshment table, pointing at a decanter. Lord Pemberton drank from that decanter, the same one the Duke and Duchess were near earlier. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Alara's blood went cold. Are you suggesting... Lord Ashford began. I'm not suggesting anything, the servant said quickly. I'm just saying what I saw. Darian's expression was carved from ice. And what exactly did you see? The Duchess. She was standing near the wine table, right before Lord Pemberton poured himself a glass. Along with 50 other people, Darian said flatly. But she was closest. I was nowhere near that decanter, Alara said, her voice shaking. I was on the balcony. After Lord Pemberton collapsed, another voice interjected. A woman Alara didn't recognize. But before? I saw you at the table. You were alone there for several minutes. That's not true. I saw it too, someone else said. She was handling the glasses. I was getting champagne, or poisoning wine. The accusations came faster now, voices overlapping, building into something dangerous. Alara felt like the walls were closing in. This is absurd, Darian said, his voice cutting through the noise. My wife has no reason to harm Lord Pemberton. Doesn't she? Lord Ashford's voice was quiet, considering. Lord Pemberton was questioning her autonomy, suggesting she might be under duress. If she wanted to silence that line of questioning, I would never, Alara started. Or perhaps it wasn't her at all, another voice suggested. Perhaps it was the Duke, using her as cover. Using a blind man's wife to poison someone? Darian's laugh was bitter. That's your theory? You just admitted you've seen poison before, Lady Pemberton shrieked from the floor. You knew what it was immediately. Because I've been trained to recognize threats, or because you're familiar with using them. The room erupted again. Alara grabbed Darian's arm. We need to leave now. If we run, it looks like guilt. If we stay, they'll tear us apart. He hesitated, and in that moment, Alara saw something she'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Then the ballroom doors crashed open. 6 men in official uniforms marched in, led by a gray-haired man with a face like granite. Chief Inspector Rothwell, Lord Ashford said. Thank the heavens. The Duke and Duchess of Blackmore. Rothwell said, his voice flat. You're both under arrest for attempted murder. The world tilted. On what grounds? Darian demanded. On the grounds that Lord Pemberton was poisoned with a rare neurotoxin, a sample of which was found in your wife's reticule. Rothwell held up a small glass vial, along with a note detailing exactly how to administer it. Alara stared at the vial. That's not mine. Save it for the magistrate. Rothwell gestured to his men. Take them. Hands grabbed Alara's arms. She tried to pull away, but the grip was iron. This is a setup, Darian said, his voice deadly calm. Someone planted that evidence. Then you can prove it in court. Rothwell nodded to his men. Move them. Alara was dragged toward the door, the crowd parting like water, their faces a blur of shock and satisfaction and vicious curiosity. She caught sight of Maribel in the corner. Her stepmother was smiling. Not the fake, sweet smile she showed in public. A real smile, triumphant and cruel. And Alara understood. This was never about money. It was about revenge. The night air hit her face as they were shoved into a police wagon. Darian was thrown in beside her, and the door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them. Darian, Alara whispered, what do we do? His hand found hers in the dark, gripping tight. We survive, he said, just like always. But for the first time since she'd met him, his voice carried something she'd never heard before. Fear. The holding cell smelled like piss and desperation. Alara sat on a wooden bench worn smooth by decades of bodies, her emerald dress filthy from the wagon floor, her hands still shaking. Across from her, Darian leaned against the stone wall, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the barred window. They'd been separated for questioning, 2 hours each in different rooms with different inspectors asking the same questions over and over until the words stopped meaning anything. Then they'd been thrown in here together and left to rot while the magistrate decided their fate. They're going to execute us, Alara said quietly. No. Darian, they found poison in my bag. Poison I've never seen before. And a note someone planted. His voice was hard. This was planned, every detail. The poison, the timing, the witnesses. Maribel doesn't have the resources to pull this off alone. Darian pushed off the wall, starting to pace. She's working with someone. Someone with access, money, connections. Lord Ashford? Possibly. Or someone using him. Darian's jaw tightened. The question is why? What do they gain from destroying us? Alara thought about it, about the map in Darian's study, the smuggling routes, the web of corruption he'd been tracking. You know too much, she said slowly, about what's happening in the city, the black market, the officials taking bribes. If they can discredit you, they can continue operating without interference. Darian stopped pacing. And framing you makes it personal, makes me desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. So what do? We don't make mistakes. A key scraped in the lock. The door swung open to reveal Chief Inspector Rothwell, his granite face impassive. Behind him stood a woman Alara didn't recognize, tall, severe, dressed in the formal robes of a magistrate. On your feet, Rothwell said. Magistrate Thorne wants a word. They stood. Alara's legs felt weak, but she locked her knees and kept her chin up. Magistrate Thorne stepped into the cell, her sharp eyes sweeping over them both. She was older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Duke Blackmore, she said. Duchess, I've reviewed the evidence against you. And, Darian asked, it's damning. Thorne pulled a folded paper from her robe. The poison found in the Duchess's reticule matches the substance in Lord Pemberton's system. The note details exact dosage and timing, and multiple witnesses placed the Duchess near the wine decanter minutes before Lord Pemberton collapsed. All circumstantial, Darian said, and easily fabricated. Perhaps, but fabricated or not, it paints a compelling picture. Thorne's gaze shifted to Alara. You made quite a scene at the ball. Publicly humiliated your stepmother, accused her of extortion. That gives you motive for wanting to silence anyone who might question your stability. I didn't poison anyone, Alara said. So you claim. Thorne refolded the paper. However, I'm told Lord Pemberton survived. Barely. He's asking to speak with you. Alara's heart kicked. He's alive? For now. The physicians aren't optimistic. Thorne turned to Rothwell. Bring them to his chambers, under guard. Lord Pemberton's townhouse was a monument to old money dying slowly. Threadbare carpets, faded wallpaper, furniture that had been expensive once but now just looked tired. Alara was marched through hallways lined with portraits of stern ancestors who seemed to judge her with every step. They were brought to a bedroom on the second floor. Lord Pemberton lay in the massive four-poster bed, propped up by pillows, his face gray and sweating. Lady Pemberton sat beside him, her eyes red and swollen. A physician hovered nearby, checking his patient's pulse with obvious concern. Magistrate Thorne gestured for the guards to wait outside. "Lord Pemberton," she said gently, "you asked to see them." Pemberton's eyes, cloudy with pain but still sharp, fixed on Alara and Darian. He studied them for a long moment, his breathing labored. "Come closer," he rasped. They approached the bed. Lady Pemberton glared at Alara with pure hatred. "You tried to kill my husband." "Quiet," Pemberton said. His wife's mouth snapped shut. He gestured weakly toward Alara. "You, the Duchess. Did you poison me?" Alara met his gaze directly. "No, sir, I didn't." "Look me in the eye and say it again." "I did not poison you." Pemberton studied her face. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I believe you." Lady Pemberton made a strangled sound. "How can you—" "Because I saw her," Pemberton interrupted. "Saw her standing by that wine table. She wasn't touching anything, just standing there, looking lost, like she didn't know what to do with herself." His breathing hitched. "But I saw someone else too. A servant. Moving around the decanters. Quick, deliberate, like they knew exactly what they were doing." Magistrate Thorne leaned forward. "Can you describe this servant? Young. Dark hair? Average height." Pemberton's eyes closed. "Didn't think anything of it at the time, but now—" "Now you're saying the Duchess was framed," Thorne finished. "I'm saying someone wanted it to look like her." Pemberton's hand reached out, surprisingly strong as it gripped Alara's wrist. "But I also saw the way she looked at that stepmother of hers, like she wanted to strangle her. That kind of anger—" He coughed wetly. "That kind of anger doesn't hide behind poison. It screams." Despite everything, Alara almost smiled. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might still die." His grip loosened. "But if I do, it won't be your fault. Magistrate, you heard me. Let them go." Thorne's expression didn't change. "It's not that simple, my lord. The physical evidence was planted, obviously." Pemberton's voice was getting weaker. "Find that servant. Question the staff. Someone paid them. Follow the money. We will conduct a thorough investigation. Do it fast, before these two rot in a cell for a crime they didn't commit." He turned his head toward Darian. "Duke Blackmore, you've been tracking the corruption in this city for years, haven't you?" Darian went very still. "Where did you hear that?" "I'm not blind. Unlike you." Pemberton managed a thin smile. "You've been gathering evidence, building a case. Someone found out. Someone powerful. And they decided to neutralize you before you could expose them." "Who?" Darian's voice was soft, dangerous. "If I knew that, I'd already be dead." Pemberton's breathing was getting worse. "But I know this. Whoever it is, they have reach, money, influence. They orchestrated this entire thing, the poison, the frame. Probably paid your stepmother to play her part." Alara's hands clenched. "Maribel's involved? She's a tool, a useful idiot." Pemberton's eyes met hers. "But the real enemy? Someone much worse. Be careful, Duchess. You've made powerful people very nervous." The physician stepped forward. "That's enough. He needs rest." Magistrate Thorne nodded. "Guards, escort the Duke and Duchess back to—" "No." Pemberton's voice cracked like a whip. "I've given my statement. They're innocent. Release them." "The evidence? Manufactured evidence doesn't override a victim's testimony. Release them. Now." Thorne's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Very well. But you're both confined to your estate until this investigation concludes. No visitors, no public appearances. And if either of you attempts to flee—" "We won't," Darian said. "See that you don't." They were escorted back to the Blackmore estate under armed guard, arriving just as dawn broke over the dead gardens. Mrs. Brennan met them at the door, her face pale with relief. "Thank the heavens. The rumors I thought—" "We're fine," Alara said, though fine felt like a grotesque overstatement. "You're filthy, both of you." Mrs. Brennan ushered them inside. "Baths, food, then rest. You look half dead." Darian shook his head. "No time. We need to—" "You need to take care of yourself first," Mrs. Brennan said firmly. Whatever you're planning, you'll do it better after you've slept and eaten. Don't argue with me, Your Grace. I've known you since you were 12. I'll win. Despite everything, Darian's mouth twitched. Fine. 2 hours. Then I'm working. Alara let herself be led upstairs, too exhausted to protest. The hot bath Mrs. Brennan drew felt like heaven against her aching muscles. She scrubbed the grime and fear from her skin, washed her hair twice, and tried not to think about how close they'd come to execution. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe, she found clean clothes laid out on her bed and a tray of food waiting. She ate mechanically, bread, cheese, fruit that tasted like nothing, then collapsed onto the bed. Sleep dragged her under like a current. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices. Alara sat up, disoriented. The candles had burned down to stubs. The tray was gone. How long had she slept? The voices were coming from downstairs. She threw on a dress and followed the sound to Darian's study. The door was ajar. Inside, Darian stood at his desk, surrounded by papers covered in braille and handwritten notes. Across from him sat 3 people Alara didn't recognize, 2 men and a woman, all dressed plainly, all watching Darian with the kind of focus that suggested they worked for him. Trace the payment to a shell company registered in Ashford's name, one of the men was saying. But the actual owner is buried under 6 layers of corporate entities. Keep digging, Darian said. Someone's funding this. Find out who. What about the stepmother, the woman asked. She received £10,000 3 days before the ball, deposited into an account she thought was hidden. Darian's smile was cold. It wasn't. The money came from the same shell company. So she was paid to play the grieving stepmother, the second man said. Create the narrative, plant the doubts, set up the Duchess for the frame. Exactly. Darian's fingers tapped against the desk. But the poison, that required access to my wife's belongings. Someone got into this house. The servants? The woman suggested. All vetted. None of them would... Darian stopped, his head tilting. Alara, I know you're there. Come in. Alara pushed the door open fully. How? You breathe louder when you're trying to be quiet. He gestured to the others. These are my investigators. They've been tracking the corruption in the city for the past 3 years. The woman stood, offering her hand. Catherine Marsh, sorry we couldn't prevent your arrest. We were gathered evidence, one of the men added, but they moved faster than we anticipated. Who's they? Alara asked. That's what we're trying to figure out. Darian moved to the map on the side table, his fingers finding the pins by memory. The smuggling routes all connect to the warehouse district. The money flows through Ashford's companies, but someone's coordinating it all. Someone with enough power to manipulate the police, the magistrate, the entire social structure. How do we prove it? Alara asked. Alara, we forced their hand. Darian turned toward her. They tried to frame you to silence me, but it failed. Lord Pemberton survived. He testified in your favor. Now they have a problem. If they move against us again, it looks suspicious. So they'll have to either back off or escalate. And if they escalate, then we'll be ready. Catherine cleared her throat. Your Grace, with respect, being ready isn't a plan. If they escalate, they'll go for a kill shot. No witnesses, no survivors. Let them try. Darian's voice was ice. I've spent 9 years building a case against these people. I know every route, every payment, every corrupt official on their payroll. If they come for us, I'll release everything. That's mutually assured destruction, the second man said. Yes, which is why they won't do it. Darian smiled grimly. They'll try something subtler, another frame job, a scandal, something designed to discredit us without making martyrs. So what do we do? Alara asked. We go public first. Darian turned to Catherine. Contact the newspapers. The legitimate ones, not the ones Ashford owns. Tell them the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore have evidence of widespread corruption and will be making a statement. They'll demand proof, Catherine said. Then we'll give them proof. Darian gestured to the papers on his desk. Everything, names, numbers, routes, but we don't release it yet. We just threaten to, make them sweat. That's dangerous, the first man said. Everything's dangerous now. Darian's jaw tightened. They made this personal when they went after my wife. Time to return the favor. The investigators left just before midnight, slipping out through a side entrance to avoid the guards still watching the main gate. Alara stayed in the study, staring at the map with all its pins and connections. You've been planning this for years, she said quietly. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because the less you knew, the safer you were. Darian moved to stand beside her. But that's changed now. They've made you a target regardless, so you deserve to know everything. Tell me. He did. The story spilled out in the quiet darkness, how he'd started noticing the patterns after his mother died. Shipments that disappeared, money that moved through ghost companies, officials who suddenly became wealthy. He'd started investigating, using his blindness as cover, people assuming he was too broken to be a threat. He'd built a network of informants, dock workers, servants, low-level clerks who saw things and remembered them. He'd spent years piecing together the web of corruption that ran through the city like rot through wood. And now, Alara asked when he finished, now we burn it down. Darian turned toward her, his pale eyes somehow finding hers despite his blindness. But I need to know you're with me. This is going to get worse before it gets better. If you want to walk away, where would I go? Alara cut him off. Back to Maribel? Back to being invisible and small and afraid? She shook her head. No, I'm done running. I'm done being a victim. This isn't about revenge, isn't it? Alara's voice sharpened. They tried to destroy us, frame us for murder, take everything. You're telling me this is just about justice? Darian was quiet for a moment. It's about both. Justice and revenge aren't mutually exclusive. Good. Alara moved closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Because I want them to pay for what they did. All of them. Even if it costs us everything? We already have nothing to lose. Darian's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. You're different than you were a month ago. A month ago, I was being sold like cattle. Now I'm being framed for murder. Tends to change a person. He smiled. You're not afraid anymore. I'm terrified. But I'm also furious. And fury's more useful than fear. His thumb traced her jawline. How did I get so lucky? Lucky? We're under house arrest facing conspiracy charges. I meant with you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Alara's breath caught. Darian. The study door crashed open. Mrs. Brennan stood there, her face white with panic. They're here, armed men, at least a dozen. They're surrounding the house. Darian's expression went cold. How long? Minutes? Maybe less. Get the servants out the back. Use the old smuggler's tunnel that runs to the greenhouse. What about you? We're staying. Darian moved to his desk, pulling out a locked drawer. Inside was a pistol. He checked it with practiced ease, his fingers finding the mechanisms by touch. Go. Now! Mrs. Brennan hesitated, then fled. Alara grabbed Darian's arm. What are you doing? What I should have done years ago. He handed her a second pistol from the drawer. Do you know how to use this? No. Point. Pull the trigger. Don't think about it. He moved toward the window. They're coming to kill us. Make it look like we resisted arrest. Justifiable force. Problem solved. Then we need to run. There's nowhere to run. Darian turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression was completely open. No walls, no masks, just raw honesty. I'm done hiding, Alara. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. But I need you to trust me. I do trust you. Then get behind the desk, stay low, and if anyone comes through that door who isn't me, I'll shoot them. His smile was fierce. That's my Duchess. The sound of breaking glass came from downstairs. Darian moved with lethal precision, positioning himself beside the door, the pistol steady in his hand. Alara crouched behind the desk, her own weapon shaking in her grip. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Voices shouted, rough, aggressive, trained. The door exploded inward. Darian fired. The first man dropped, clutching his shoulder. The second dove for cover. Darian fired again, the shot wild but forcing them back. Blackmore! A voice roared. Come out peacefully, and we won't hurt the girl. Like hell, Darian shouted back. More footsteps. More men flooding the hallway. Alara's finger tightened on the trigger, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. A man appeared in the doorway, masked, armed, and Alara fired. The recoil knocked her backward. The shot went wide, splintering wood beside the man's head, but he stumbled back in surprise. She's armed, someone yelled. Take them both! The chaos that followed was a blur of gunfire and shouting and Darian moving with terrifying efficiency. Every shot calculated, every movement precise despite his blindness. But there were too many. A blow from behind sent Darian to his knees. His pistol skidded across the floor. Alara screamed, lunging for it, but hands grabbed her, dragging her backward. Let her go! Darian snarled, fighting against the men holding him. A new voice cut through the chaos. Enough! Everyone froze. Chief Inspector Rothwell stood in the doorway, flanked by uniformed officers. His expression was thunderous. "What in hell is going on here?" he demanded. The masked men exchanged glances. "We had orders," one started. "From who?" Rothwell's hand moved to his own weapon. "Because I didn't authorize any raid, and unless you're part of the official police force, you're trespassing on a duke's property and assaulting a peer of the realm." Silence. "I asked you a question," Rothwell said, his voice deadly quiet. "Who sent you?" The masked man in front pulled off his mask, revealing a scarred face and cold eyes. "Lord Ashford. He said they were dangerous." "Lord Ashford doesn't have the authority to order a raid." Rothwell gestured to his officers. "Arrest them. All of them. Conspiracy, assault, breaking, and entering." The uniformed officers moved forward, disarming the masked men and cuffing them with brutal efficiency. Rothwell turned to Darian, who was being helped to his feet by Alara. "Your Grace, are you injured?" "I'll live." Darian's voice was hoarse. "How did you—" "Lord Pemberton sent word. Said he'd remembered more details. Asked me to check on you." Rothwell's expression softened slightly. "Seems he was right to be concerned." "Lord Ashford sent them," Alara said. "He's behind all of this." "I know." Rothwell pulled a folded warrant from his coat. "Magistrate Thorne signed this 2 hours ago. Warrant for Lord Ashford's arrest on charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and corruption. We've been gathering evidence all day." Darian stared at him. "You believe us?" Lord Pemberton's testimony was compelling, and when we started looking into that shell company, the whole thing unraveled. Money trails leading back to Ashford, payments to your stepmother, bribes to half the city council. Rothwell's mouth twisted. He's been running this city like his personal fiefdom for years. But he got sloppy, desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. "Is he in custody?" Alara asked. "As of 20 minutes ago, yes, along with several others." Rothwell looked between them. "You're both free to go. The charges against you have been dropped. Official apology from the magistrate's office will be forthcoming." Alara's knees went weak. "It's over?" "The immediate threat is over," Rothwell corrected. "But you've made powerful enemies. Some of Ashford's associates are still out there. My advice, stay visible. Stay public. Make yourselves too prominent to quietly disappear." "We can do that," Darian said. Rothwell nodded. "I'll post guards outside until things settle. In the meantime," he gestured to the wreckage of the study, "you might want to get this cleaned up." He left, his officers escorting the arrested men out. Alara and Darian stood alone in the destroyed study, surrounded by splintered wood and scattered papers and the sharp smell of gunpowder. "We're alive," Alara said numbly. "Yes. We won. For now." She turned to look at him. His face was bruised, his coat torn, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. He looked like he'd been through a war. He looked beautiful. "Thank you," Alara said. "For what?" "For fighting for us. For not giving up." Darian's hand found hers, threading their fingers together. "I told you. You're stronger than you think. You just needed to realize it. I think we both did." He pulled her closer, and for a moment they just stood there, holding on to each other in the wreckage. Two people who'd been broken and discarded and written off. Two people who'd refused to stay down. "What happens now?" Alara asked quietly. "Now?" Darian's smile was sharp. "Now we finish what we started. Expose everyone. Clean up the city. Make sure everyone knows the Blind Duke and his unwanted Duchess are not to be underestimated." "That sounds exhausting." "Probably." He tilted his head, his pale eyes somehow finding hers. "Worth it, though." "Yeah," Alara agreed. "It is." Outside, dawn was breaking over the estate. The gardens she'd brought back to life. The greenhouse where hope had taken root. The home she'd chosen to claim as her own. She wasn't the discarded daughter anymore. She was the Duchess of Blackmore. And she was just getting started. The first rays of sunlight cut through the shattered windows of Darian's study, illuminating the wreckage like a crime scene. And in a way, it was. Alara stood among the debris, broken furniture, scattered papers, bullet holes in the walls, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief. Not quite victory. Something harder, sharper. Purpose. "We should get you cleaned up," she said, turning to Darian. The cut above his eyebrow was still bleeding, streaking down his temple in a dark line. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding all over your shirt. I've had worse." That's not the point. Alara grabbed his arm, guiding him toward a chair that hadn't been destroyed. Sit. Let me look at it. He obeyed, surprisingly compliant, while she retrieved a clean cloth and water from the basin Mrs. Brennan had left earlier. The housekeeper had returned as soon as the police cleared out, taking one look at the study and immediately disappearing to fetch supplies. Alara dabbed carefully at the wound, wiping away blood. Darian winced but didn't pull away. You're good at this, he said. I've had practice. She rinsed the cloth. My mother used to get migraines. Bad ones. I'd sit with her, put cold compresses on her forehead, make sure she took her medicine. You took care of her. Someone had to. Alara's throat tightened. My father certainly didn't. He'd just hide in his study and pretend nothing was wrong. Sounds familiar. She pressed the cloth against his cut, maybe a little harder than necessary. He hissed. Sorry, she said, not particularly meaning it. No, you're not. No, I'm not. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. I like this version of you, angry, honest, not apologizing for existing. I'm still terrified, Alara admitted. My hands haven't stopped shaking since they broke down the door. Fear and courage aren't opposites. You can be both at the same time. She finished cleaning the wound and stepped back, studying him. Even bruised and bloodied, he looked formidable, unbreakable. How do you do it? She asked quietly. Stay so calm when everything's falling apart. Practice. And knowing that falling apart won't solve anything. He reached out, his hand finding hers with that unsettling accuracy. But I'm not calm, Alara. I'm furious. I've just learned how to use it instead of letting it use me. Before she could respond, Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, carrying fresh bandages and a tray of food that smelled like salvation. You both need to eat, she said, setting the tray on the least damaged section of desk. And then you need to sleep. Real sleep, not whatever you've been doing. We don't have time, Darian started. You'll make time. Mrs. Brennan's voice left no room for argument. Chief Inspector Rothwell said the guards will be here all day. You're safe. So eat, sleep, and then you can go back to fighting whatever war you're waging. Alara's stomach growled, betraying her. Mrs. Brennan's mouth twitched. See, even your body knows I'm right. The housekeeper turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Both of you. You stood your ground when most people would have run. She left before either of them could respond. They ate in silence, too exhausted for conversation. The food was simple. Bread, cheese, cold meat, fruit, but it tasted better than anything Alara had eaten in weeks. When they finished, Darian stood, swaying slightly. Bed, Alara said firmly. Now. You need to not collapse from exhaustion. She took his arm. Come on. I'll make sure you don't fall down the stairs. She guided him to his chambers, larger than hers, darker, filled with the same meticulous organization she'd noticed everywhere he lived. Everything had a place. Everything could be found by touch. He sank onto the bed with a groan. Stay, he said quietly. Alara froze. What? Stay, please. His voice was rough with exhaustion. I don't want to be alone right now. She should leave. Should go to her own room, maintain proper distance, remember that this was still a marriage of convenience born from desperation. But she didn't want to be alone either, so she kicked off her shoes and lay down beside him, careful to leave space between them. Thank you, he murmured. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. Ella stared at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her body's exhaustion. They'd survived. Ashford was in custody. The charges were dropped, but Rothwell's warning echoed in her head. You've made powerful enemies. This wasn't over. Not really. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her under too. She woke to afternoon light and the realization that she was pressed against Darian's side, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped around her. She should move, should extract herself before this got complicated. Instead, she stayed perfectly still, listening to his heartbeat. You're awake, he said quietly. How did you? Your breathing changed. His arm tightened slightly. How long have you been up? A few minutes. And you didn't run. I'm tired of running. He was quiet for a moment, then, this changes things, doesn't it? What does? This, us, whatever this is becoming. Alara pushed herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. His pale eyes stared at nothing, but his expression was open, vulnerable, in a way she'd never seen. I don't know what this is, she said honestly. A month ago, I was being sold off to clear debts. Now I'm lying in bed with a man who just fought off a dozen armed attackers, and I'm not scared of him. I'm scared for him, and I don't know what that means. It means you care. Of course I care. You're the first person in my entire life who's treated me like I matter. You do matter. His hand came up, cupping her face. You've always mattered. You just needed someone to see it. Alara's throat felt tight. Darian! A sharp knock interrupted her. Your Grace? Catherine's voice came through the door. We have news. It's urgent. Darian sat up with a curse. Come in. Catherine entered, followed by the two male investigators from the previous night. All three looked agitated. Lord Ashford's talking, Catherine said without preamble. Trying to cut a deal with the magistrate. He's offering to name names, expose the entire network, in exchange for reduced charges. Let him, Darian said. It'll save us the trouble. There's more. Catherine pulled out a folded newspaper. This morning's edition, front page. Alara took it, her blood going cold as she read the headline. Duke and Duchess Blackmore survive assassination attempt. Lord Ashford arrested in connection with conspiracy to murder. The article detailed everything. The poisoning at the ball, the false evidence, the raid on the estate. But what made Alara's hands shake was the final paragraph. Sources close to the investigation report that Duke Darian Blackmore has been quietly gathering evidence of widespread corruption for years, utilizing his blindness to avoid suspicion while building an extensive case against numerous city officials and business leaders. His wife, Duchess Alara Blackmore, formerly Miss Alara Vance, has proven instrumental in recent weeks, refusing to be intimidated despite multiple attempts on her life and reputation. The whole city knows now, one of the male investigators said, about the corruption, about what you've been doing, about everything. Darian's expression was unreadable. How did they? Lord Pemberton, Catherine said. He talked to the press, gave them everything, said he wanted the truth out before someone tried to bury it again. Clever bastard, Darian muttered. It gets better, Catherine continued, or worse, depending on perspective. The other nobles are panicking. Half of them are trying to distance themselves from Ashford, claiming they had no idea. The other half are demanding investigations into their rivals. The entire social structure is imploding, the second investigator added, and you two are at the center of it. Alara set down the newspaper, her mind reeling. What does this mean for us? It means you're famous, Catherine said. The blind duke who exposed a citywide conspiracy, and the duchess who refused to be silenced. People are calling you heroes. We're not heroes, Darian said flatly. We just refuse to die quietly. Tell that to the crowd outside your gates. Alara and Darian exchanged a look. What crowd? Alara asked. Catherine gestured toward the window. See for yourself. They moved to the window, Alara looking out while Darian stood beside her, his hand finding her shoulder. The gates of the estate were lined with people. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Some held signs. Others just stood there watching the house. What are they doing? Alara whispered. Waiting, Catherine said. They want to see you, talk to you, thank you. Thank us for what? For proving that the powerful aren't untouchable. For standing up to the corruption that's been bleeding this city dry for years. Catherine's voice softened. You gave them hope, Your Grace. Both of you. Darian's jaw tightened. Hope is dangerous. So is despair, and that's all they've had for a long time. Alara stared at the crowd, something fierce and bright igniting in her chest. These were people like her, people who'd been invisible, dismissed, used by those in power, people who deserved better. We should talk to them, she said. Alara, they came here. The least we can do is acknowledge them. Darian was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, but we do it together, and we tell them the truth. This isn't over. The fight's just beginning. They stood at the gates 20 minutes later, flanked by guards, facing a sea of faces. The crowd had grown. Easily 300 people now, maybe more. Workers in rough clothes, servants, shopkeepers. The kind of people Alara had grown up invisible to, or rather, the kind of people the wealthy had trained themselves not to see. A woman near the front stepped forward, her hands trembling. Your Grace, shh, Duchess. We wanted to thank you for what you did, for standing up to them. We didn't do it alone, Alara said, and we didn't do it for recognition. We did it because it needed to be done. You could have run, a man called out. After they tried to frame you, you could have left the city, hidden somewhere safe, but you stayed. You fought. Running wasn't an option, Darian said quietly. Not when staying meant the difference between justice and letting corruption win. What happens now? Another voice asked. Ashford's arrested, but there are others, his associates, the officials he paid off. Will they face justice too? If I have anything to say about it, yes. Darian's voice carried across the crowd. I've spent 9 years gathering evidence. Names, dates, transactions, every corrupt official, every bribed inspector, every noble who thought they were above the law. It's all documented, and it's all going to the magistrate's office, the newspapers, and anyone else who'll listen. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Excitement, disbelief, hope. But I need your help, Darian continued. The people in power will fight this. They'll try to bury the evidence, discredit the witnesses, make this go away. They're good at that. They've been doing it for decades. So I need you to stay vigilant, pay attention, don't let them hide the truth. And if they come after you again, someone shouted, then we deal with it. Alara spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. They've tried to silence us before. It didn't work. We're not going anywhere. The crowd erupted into applause. Alara stood there, overwhelmed, as people cheered and called out thanks and pressed forward to shake their hands. This was power, not the kind Maribel had craved. Social standing, expensive clothes, the ability to look down on others. Real power, the kind that came from standing with people instead of above them, from refusing to accept injustice just because it was convenient. When they finally made it back inside, Ilara's hands were shaking again. That was terrifying, she said. You were perfect, Darian replied. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Lord Ashford's trial became the most talked about event in the city. Every day brought new revelations, officials accepting bribes, warehouse owners smuggling illegal goods, nobles using their influence to crush competition and silence critics. Darian testified for 3 hours, laying out his evidence with methodical precision. Alara testified too, recounting the poisoning, the frame job, the raid on their estate. The courtroom was packed every single day. And every single day, when they left, the crowd outside applauded. Maribel tried one last desperate move, publishing a letter claiming Alara had been brainwashed, manipulated, turned against her own family. It backfired spectacularly. The newspapers tore her apart. Letters poured in from former servants, neighbors, anyone who'd witnessed her cruelty over the years. Within 48 hours, she'd become a pariah, shunned by the very social circles she'd spent years trying to climb. Alara's father sent a letter. She almost didn't open it. When she did, the words were brief, formal, and utterly worthless. Alara, I hope you are well. Your stepmother's actions were regrettable. If there's anything I can do to assist you, please let me know. Father. No apology. No acknowledgement of his years of silence. Just a carefully worded attempt to distance himself from Maribel's downfall. Alara burned the letter in the fireplace and didn't look back. The trial concluded 3 weeks after it started. Lord Ashford was found guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, corruption, bribery. The judge sentenced him to 30 years. 14 of his associates were convicted alongside him. Dozens more were under investigation. The city's entire power structure was collapsing, and Darian and Alara stood at the center of it. We did it, Alara said as they walked through the gardens on the first truly warm day of spring. The roses she'd planted were blooming, brilliant reds and deep purples climbing the trellises she'd repaired. We survived, Darian corrected. The real work starts now. What real work? Rebuilding. Making sure the corruption doesn't just grow back the moment we're not paying attention. He turned toward her, his expression serious. I've been thinking. The estate has resources, money, influence. We could use it for something better than just maintaining appearances. Like what? A foundation. Help for people who can't afford legal representation, support for workers trying to organize, education programs. He paused. Your mother, what did she care about? The question caught Alara off guard. She wanted to teach. Before she married my father, she worked at a small school in the factory district. She always said education was the only way people could escape poverty. Then we start there. A school. Free education for anyone who wants it. Alara stared at him. You're serious. Why wouldn't I be? Because that's a massive undertaking. It'll take years, resources, constant work. Good thing we're both stubborn then. His hand found hers. What do you think? Want to build something that actually matters? Alara looked around the gardens, the life she'd coaxed back from death, the beauty she'd created from ruins. If she could do this, she could do anything. Yes, she said. Let's build something that matters. 6 months later, the Blackmore Academy opened its doors. It was smaller than Alara had dreamed. Only 2 classrooms and a small library. But it was real. 30 students showed up on the first day. Children from the factory district and the docks, kids who'd never had access to education before. Alara stood at the entrance, greeting each one, while Darian worked behind the scenes, managing finances and hiring teachers. They worked themselves to exhaustion, and it felt incredible. The estate transformed too. The dead gardens became gathering spaces. The greenhouse became a training center for botany students. The empty wings of the house were converted into offices and meeting rooms. People came to them now, workers seeking advice, families needing legal help, organizers looking for support. The Blackmores became symbols, proof that the powerful could be held accountable, that change was possible. And through it all, Alara and Darian grew closer. Not smoothly, not easily. They fought. They disagreed. There were nights when Alara wanted to scream at his stubbornness, and mornings when Darian's silence felt like a wall she couldn't break through. But they stayed. They chose each other, every single day, in a way that felt more real than any vow. One evening, as they sat in the library, Alara reading reports while Darian worked through correspondence in Braille, he spoke without looking up. I love you. Alara's hand stilled on the papers. What? I love you, I have for months, but I didn't know how to say it without it sounding like obligation or gratitude or something that isn't real. He set down his stylus. But it is real. You're real. And I love you. Alara's throat felt tight. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He turned toward her. You saved my life, Alara. Not from the assassins or the frame job. From myself. From 9 years of hiding and planning and forgetting what it felt like to actually live. You saved mine too, she whispered. I was drowning, invisible. Convinced I didn't matter. You made me see differently. So we're even? No, we're partners. He stood crossing the room with that unsettling confidence and pulled her into his arms. Partners, he agreed. And then he kissed her. It wasn't perfect. His mouth was tentative, uncertain, like he'd forgotten how. Her hand shook as they found his face, but it was real. And real was better than perfect. 1 year after their wedding, they held a ball. Not because they wanted to impress anyone, not because society demanded it, but because they'd won. The estate blazed with light and music. The gardens overflowed with spring blooms. The guests were a mix of nobility, workers, teachers, students, people who'd never been in the same room before, mingling with varying degrees of comfort. Alara wore green again, not because it was expected, but because she liked it. Darian wore his formal black, his hand steady in hers as they greeted guests. Lord Pemberton appeared, moving with a cane, but alive. Your Graces, quite the transformation. You're looking well, Alara said. For someone who was poisoned 6 months ago, I'm exceptional. He grinned. Heard you're opening a second school next year. If the funding comes through, yes. It will. I'm contributing. Pemberton's expression turned serious. You changed this city, both of you. Don't ever forget that. We had help, Darian said. You had courage. That's rarer. Later, as they danced, Darian navigating the floor with the same precision he did everything, Alara caught sight of someone at the edge of the crowd. Her father. He stood often watching them with an expression she couldn't read. He's here, she murmured to Darian. I know, I heard him arrive. Should I? That's your choice, not mine. Alara studied the man who'd failed her for so many years, who'd chosen silence over protection, comfort over courage. Part of her wanted to walk over, wanted to hear him apologize, acknowledge what he'd done, beg for forgiveness. But a bigger part of her realized she didn't need that anymore. His approval didn't define her. His love didn't complete her. She'd built a life without him, and it was a good life. She turned back to Darian, pressing closer as they moved through the steps. I'm happy, she said, surprised by the truth of it. So am I. A year ago I was being sold like property. A year ago I was hiding in a tomb. And now? Now we're alive. The music swelled, the lights blazed, the room filled with laughter and conversation, and the sound of people who'd been enemies learning to coexist. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real was everything. As the night wore on and the guests began to leave, Alara and Darian stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens, the same balcony where everything had started to change. Do you ever regret it? Alara asked. Marrying me? Never. Even when I'm stubborn and argumentative? Especially then. He pulled her close. You're the best decision I never planned to make. That's the worst romantic line I've ever heard. I'm blind, not smooth. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Below them, the garden stretched out in the moonlight, blooming, thriving, alive. Just like them. Two people the world had tried to break. Two people who'd refused to stay broken. And together, they'd built something that mattered. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real.